Chapter 11 Arjun Kaurav Military Camp. Arjun sat at the head of the war council as Duryodhan, Karna and all other commanders and kings surrounded him. Jaydrath was looking pale-faced as he glanced here and there nervously. Duryodhan said to Arjun, "Preceptor, my spies have sent solid intel. I have told you everything I have come to know. You must do something to protect my brother-in-law from Arjun tomorrow. I fear that he will attack our camp tonight itself and kill me," Jaydrath said, glancing sideways at the tent entrance. "Arjun is a man of his word," Arjun said, leaning back in his seat. "If he has said tomorrow, it will be tomorrow, not tonight." "Is all of this a joke to you?" Jaydrath said. "I did exactly as you told me, and—" "Exactly," Arjun leaned forward at the Sindhu king and hissed. "I told you to let Yudhishthir past and block others. You blocked Yudhishthir himself. If it was up to me, I would let Arjun have you." "Preceptor," Duryodhan said, "forget about capturing Yudhishthir for the time being. I couldn't protect my son, but we need to protect Jaydrath. I am not going to see my sister widowed, not when we can do something about it." "I will ensure that Jaydrath lives tomorrow," Arjun said, standing up, "not for any relation but for strategy. If Arjun cannot kill him before sunset like he has vowed, he will kill himself. With him gone, it will be a piece of cake for us to get Yudhishthir and defeat the Pandavas. Fear not, King Jaydrath, for tomorrow I will make a raze that Arjun cannot penetrate." He then looked around him and added, "Saving Jaydrath tomorrow is going to be the foremost aim. Anything else is secondary and expendable." He then turned at Duryodhan and continued, "And if you wish to save your brother-in-law and still live your encounter with an enraged Arjun, I would suggest that you put on the special armor that I am about to give you." Pandav Military Camp. A messenger had been dispatched to Upaplavya with the news of Abhimanyu's death. Subhadra, Arjun's wife and Krishna's dearest little sister, was there with Draupadi and Kunti. She would be devastated when she will hear the news, as Abhimanyu was her only son. Krishna had once insisted Arjun to abduct his sister and marry her by the warrior's way. If he had known that this fate was written for her sister, he would have faltered then. But there was little time to think of those matters now. There was a huge job at hand for him and the warrior who he drives. Krishna entered Arjun's tent and found him in deep meditation before an earthen sculpture of a Shiva linga. He joined his palms at the holy structure and sat down on the ground beside the diadem-adorned Arjun. He knew that more than prayers, they needed a strategy. "It was foolish and rash to make a vow like that," Krishna said finally, as Arjun opened his eyes. "The Kaurav's spies have surely found out by now and plans to stop you tomorrow." "Are you asking me to go back on my words in fear of those killers of my son?" Arjun asked, at which Krishna shook his head and replied, "No, but we need a plan." Amidst the Kuru Field, next day, Arjun threw every knowledge of warfare and geometry that he had into arraying his troops today. He formed a mixture of cart array and discus array, with nested arrays inside them, like a needle-shaped one within a lotus-shaped array. Jaydrath was at the furthest rear end of the dense needle formation, where was stationed Duryodhan, Karna and Kritavarma protecting him. At the head of the main cart formation was the Generalissimo himself. And even before him was stationed Dushasan with a huge army of elephants, horses and chariots. In answer, Shatanik and Drishtadyumna together formed their aggressive formation for penetrating the composite formation of the enemy, keeping Arjun and Krishna at the head. A part of the Pandav army with some large elephants carrying huge banners on their backs was placed away from the main army towards the west and close to their camp. This was ordered by Krishna for reasons best known to him. With sunrise, the war horns were blown and the two formations smashed into each other, exchanging arrows, spears and clanging blades against blades and maces against maces. Arjun had with him today more quivers of arrows and more types of arrows than he had ever carried with him in this war. He took up arrows with broad serrated heads and tips of crescent shape to decapitate and amputate warriors who came before him, regardless of whether they are foot soldiers, riders, or chariot warriors. His brothers behind him, along with the Vrishnis led by Satyaki, Panchals led by Drishtadyumna and Drupad, and the Matsya army led by Virat, rained their own arrows on the enemy, clearing the way for Arjun. Using his drug-laden arrows at safe distances, Arjun created mass confusion and scattered the enemy defenses. Dushasan with his elephantry came for blocking Arjun. The innumerable arrows, like rain, inflicted so much pain of the elephants that they either fell or turned back. Arjun aimed for the mahouts atop the mammoths and dropped warriors every second. Hit with Arjun's arrows in his exposed parts, Dushasan turned back wounded to the safety of Drun's cart array. "I request you to leave my path, Preceptor," Arjun said as he approached the formidable Generalissimo, protecting the array, who replied with a smile, "You are not going anywhere without killing me first." He shot back at Arjun, who ducked behind his shield, and his Gandiv twanged in answer. Drun's arrows hit not only Arjun, but also Krishna, and so dangerous were those weapons that the two would have been severed to pieces, if not for their shields and armors. Drun's next arrow cut a few of the strings on Arjun's bow, but since the Gandiv had a lot of strings tied for such emergency purposes, Arjun did not falter and continued, bleeding from his wounds all the while. "Do not waste time, Arjun," Krishna said, shielding himself from the downpour of arrows. "We must find Jaydrath as quickly as possible." "As you say," Arjun said, and ducked behind his shield as his able Yadav charioteer circled around Drun and bypassed him, while the preceptor was left to deal with the trailing Pandav army. "Where are you going, Arjun?" Drun said, addressing Arjun on the leaving chariot, retreating from a fight. "Come on, son, I challenge you, defeat me first." "I have no intention of killing my preceptor," Arjun said aloud, having finally learnt to control his pride for the sake of strategy. Drun left his station and followed Arjun, which gave the rest of the Pandav army an open invitation to penetrate the array without the stonewall resistance. Drun shot arrows at Arjun, while his charioteer tried to intercept Krishna, but the Yadav horses were much faster, and they helped Arjun and Krishna to stay ahead and clear of Drun. Next, Arjun faced Kritavarma, protecting the head of the needle-shaped formation. They exchanged arrows, and not only Arjun, but Krishna was also injured by the foe's shafts, although not fatally. Then, without striving to kill Kritavarma, Arjun bypassed him too, but could not enter the needle array. He moved along its length, fighting with the commanders and princes forming the lotus array. He killed with his arrows the prince of Kamboj, and moved on, followed by the Pandav horde for whom he made way, exactly as it had been once planned by Abhimanyu. Arjun's strong chariot and his larger-than-normal shield that he was using today made it difficult for people to stop him, while the marksman Arjun's arrows maimed and slayed any and every enemy that came before him, regardless of their status being king, prince, commander, or common soldier. Arjun's impossibly rapid moves on his chariot were blurry as he pulled out arrows from his quiver, knocked them on his bow, drew the string and shot. Drun was unable to reach him, and was also compelled to hold ground to stop the Pandav army that had penetrated deep into his broken array. Drun rained arrows on the Panchal forces, while Drishtadyumna countered with his shafts, his preceptor and the archers accompanying him. Drun killed off Drishtadyumna's horses, and Satyaki rushed to rescue the Panchal crown prince, while himself getting engaged in an arrow fight with the Kaurav generalissimo. Coming across the Avanti soldiers, Arjun killed their commanders and princes and scattered their army. Then suddenly Arjun's chariot slowed down and the horses neighed loudly while bleeding and sweating profusely. "The horses are tired from the incessant moving and battling," Krishna said. "I need to tend to the wounds and get them some water, but there's no well here." "Here," Arjun said, giving Krishna 2 of his waterskins that were kept in a shielded compartment within the chariot. As Krishna plucked the arrows out of the beasts and held the waterskins to their mouths for drinking, Arjun jumped down from the chariot and, keeping the vehicle's body as a shield to his back, and his own shield raised in front, he shot arrows ambidextrously on all 4 sides, keeping the forces at bay, while the riders who were still with him surrounded them with outward raised spear for more protection. As the horses were soothed and drank to satisfaction, Krishna and Arjun returned to their places and the venture continued. They now tried to penetrate the needle-shaped array from the side, and like a wall, stood before them Duryodhan. He was covered from head to toe in a chainmail and armor plates. Even his headgear was curved downwards and protected almost all parts of his face, except his eyes, which were too small a target. The plates covered the entirety of his limbs, up to even the knuckle of his hands. And he awkwardly brandished his bow with all the burden on himself. At this, Arjun took up his conch and blew into it, as a signal of challenge and glory. Today I will purge myself of the insult offered to me through Draupadi brought about by this evil soul. Arjun said, I will cut off his head. Let us see what you can actually do, Arjun. Duryodhan taunted through his armor, why don't you use your weapons without wasting time? Duryodhan's arrows came and hit Arjun and Krishna while they tried shielding themselves. The arrows snapped one of the reins in Krishna's grip, and both of them bled from the minor arrow wounds. Arjun replied with his Gandiv as he shot arrows capable of penetrating painfully through any chain mail. But they bounced back from Duryodhan's tough armor, like straw thrown on a wall. The chains and the armor was made of the same impenetrable alloy which grandsire Bhishma wore, except for the fact that there was hardly any exposed part on the enemy's body to target now. Arjun shot arrows again, and once more found the same result. This has to be the preceptor's idea, Arjun said, to stall me. Shielding himself from the next set of enemy arrows, Arjun picked up the only arrow laden with Indian Greek fire that he had. This arrow was lodged into his chariot pole while fighting with the grandsire on the 9th day of the war. He knocked it on his bow and setting the tip on fire, he said, the blast will damage the armor and clear our way. He aimed at Duryodhan, and before he could release, Ashwatthama's crescent-tipped arrow whizzed in and broke the fire arrow in half, making it fall down on the chariot and get smothered. From a distance, Ashwatthama only smiled at Arjun. Was that the only one? Krishna asked, to which Arjun nodded and picked up his regular arrows. He used them to hit Duryodhan's fingers, the only exposed part, holding his bow. As the bow dropped, Arjun killed Duryodhan's horses and broke the axle of his wheels, thus rendering him stranded, while Arjun's chariot bypassed him and penetrated into the array they intended for. The remaining archers and soldiers of the array cried their war cry and started to resist Arjun and his forces. On the other side, Drun and the Kaurav forces were engaged with the Panchals and the Pandavs. Sahadeva fought with the Kaurav, Durmuk, Burisrava fought with the 5 sons of Draupadi, turn by turn. Alambush was engaged with Bhim, and Yudhishthir was against Drun. Today the eldest Pandav had no intention of getting caught without dying first, and he was no longer afraid, as he answered every arrow of the preceptor, while he was bleeding and covered in arrows himself. Alambush, inflicted with arrows of Bhim, fled from him on his chariot, while Bhim's cannibal son, Ghatotkacha, followed him. He jumped on Alambush's chariot and together the two fell and rolled on the ground. Then, exhibiting his superb strength of arms, Ghatotkacha held the legs of Alambush and dragged him over the ground, whirling him and hitting him against broken chariots and the ground, splattering the blood mud high. With each strike, Ghatotkacha grunted and said, "For Iravan." Finally, mangled with more than one bones in his body snapped, Alambush of Raksha's clan died in the battlefield. Meanwhile, the sky was darkening. Finding a gap and dispatched by Yudhishthir for protection of Arjun, Satyaki with a small portion of his army, followed by Bhim, managed to bypass the battling Drun and his army and enter the needle formation. There Bhim encountered Karna and exchanged arrows with that excellent archer and soon deprived him of his chariot. Then he faced Durmuk, one of the Kaurav brothers, and killed him with arrows without giving any chance for response. This was followed by Bhim, slaying one after the other 18 more of his Kaurav cousins, including Vikarna, the only Kaurav to protest against Draupadi's disrobing. Then Karna, rising to a new chariot, used his arrows to break Bhim's bow and render him chariotless in return. "You should stick to feasts and not the battlefield," Karna said, laughing, and surprisingly let him go. "Let's not forget that you lost to me first," Bhim replied. Then he got on one of the Yadav chariots and, resuming his pursuit of Satyaki, went after Arjun, following the sound of the Devdatta conch. Now the Kaurav cousin, Burisrava, rushed at Satyaki, attempting to stop him from penetrating their array further. He shot arrows at the Yadav incessantly, and Satyaki answered with equal prowess. They killed off each other's steeds and broke each other's bow, unwilling to give up an inch of land to the other. Then, armed with swords, they climbed down from their useless chariots and clashed with each other. But soon, Satyaki's sword clattered to the ground at the strike of his formidable enemy, and the Yadav fell down. Burisrava raised his own sword to cut off Satyaki's head, but a crescent-headed arrow flew in and sliced off the Kaurav cousin's hand from the wrist. Grabbing his bleeding stub of arm, Burisrava fell down on the ground crying in pain, as both he and Satyaki turned to the source of the weapon. Arjun stood about 100 meters ahead, on his chariot with his Gandiv pointed at them. "You honorable son of Pandu," Burisrava chewed his words, shouting at Arjun, "how can you attack me from behind?" "I only protected Satyaki," Arjun shouted back his reply, "in a battle that's not against the rules. You should watch your back when trying to kill another." "Fine then," Burisrava said challengingly, "kill me, Arjun, unarmed and helpless. Here I sit." Satyaki rose instead, and unable to shake of the shame of such decisive defeat at the hands of his foe, he picked up his fallen sword and cut off Burisrava's head without warning. The Kaurav heroes and soldiers present there spoke up, condemning Satyaki's act of killing an unarmed warrior. "This is dishonorable for a Yadav," they said, and Satyaki questioned back, "Where was this honor of yours when 6 warriors killed a child?" "Let's not waste time," Arjun urged Krishna, and turning the chariot, they went towards the rear of the needle array, followed by the Yadav warriors. "We have to protect Jaydrath," Duryodhan, through his armor, spoke to Karna close to him as they moved through their array. Keeping the ruler of Sindhu hidden behind them, the Sindhu warriors, Duryodhan, Karna, Ashwatthama and Shalya, held ground against Arjun and the battalion with him. Arjun engaged with Karna, a long-expected battle that they each looked forward to. But Arjun was in no mood for that thought, and he pushed himself to the limits, as he blocked and shot back arrows at his foe, sometimes hitting him, while sometimes himself getting hit. He killed Karna's charioteer and steeds, whereafter Karna climbed to Ashwatthama's chariot, and their fight continued. He continuously blocked arrows from Ashwatthama, Karna and Duryodhan and Shalya, while responding to their attacks. The battle seemed to be in an impasse, with 4 against 1, while Arjun's battalion engaged with the Sindhu soldiers. Then the war horns were blown from the Pandav side first, and then the reply came from Kaurav's side, marking sunset. The sun had disappeared in the scarlet west, and Arjun failed to fulfill his vow of killing Jaydrath before sunset.
To be continued. Stay tuned for the next chapter.